From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports. The Business of Esports Podcast is sponsored by Esports Entertainment Group, a leading esports and online gambling company. For more information, go check them out at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports Podcast. I am Paul Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, Jimmy Baratta. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the love, the 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you for telling your friends and your colleagues about the podcast if you haven't already do so. And I know so many of you, I am humbled. Jimmy, I will say this is maybe the perfect intro to our podcast. Jimmy and I are in Las Vegas this week again. We are doing this from our hotel rooms. Apologies if the audio is not as great as, when we're in studio and everything. But I'm humbled every time someone comes up and says, hey, I'm a huge fan of the podcast. I'm a huge fan of the Prophet. So thank you guys. If, the listeners who came up, you know who you are. It's really appreciated. And Jimmy, how's it going? How's this conference been for you? How has the Esports Business Summit been?
Yeah, to build off that point, not only do we have a lot of people coming up and appreciating the Prophet's wisdom, we're also here with Jeff, the Juice Cohen from our live after show. And
no, don't go say hi to the Juice. Don't go say hi.
The boss. And so, it's fun, for the whole gang to be together in person. The conference has been great. I think there's a lot of our listeners, that are here in Vegas, networking, working in esports, sharing what they're up to, offering their insights as panelists. And for us that do this on a weekly basis, it's business as usual. But I think for the industry at large, it's nice to get out of, the home offices, to see everyone in person and to, shake some hands and hug some familiar faces.
What do you get out of this conference, Jimmy? I'm curious.
Me personally, I just every single day I'm always trying to find other people and learn what they're doing in this space. Doesn't matter what entry point, what perspective. It's a big reason why I love the show, because we have so many different great guests from so many different walks of esports. And, I truly believe that a rising tide raises all ships in this industry. You guys know I'm an investor in XSET. That doesn't stop us from working with other orgs, from approaching other competitive teams and finding ways to elevate each other's brands. I thought FaZe and Optic did a good job of that, with their merch release. And the same thing goes in business. There are competitors in this space, but there are also collaborators. And it really just depends on the people behind the projects, what their philosophies are. So for me, coming into these events and doing what I do, it's really just finding like-minded people. There's no shortage of opportunity. It's really just who do you want to work with, I guess. So
did you learn anything this week? I'm curious. What was the big takeaway?
I learned that the Prophet, Paul the Prophet Dawalibi, can work a room better than the best of them. There was a really insightful panel on diversity and inclusion in esports. There's some very strong women in particular that were on that panel. Erin Simon from XSET was one of them. I thought she did a wonderful job. Afterwards, I watched the music panel, actually, with our friend Clinton Sparks, also from XSET. Not trying to give my team there too heavy of a plug on this show,
because this is sponsored by.
But I just, it's nice when you get to see people like you, Paul, or people like Clinton and Aaron, who I work with regularly, in a different element from our traditional calls and deals, where you see them answering the tough questions, right, and relaying what they're doing to an unfamiliar audience. and you have a sense of pride, right? Where you're like, hey, that person's a partner of mine, or I'm involved on that project, and this person is a representative of that, and they're doing you proud. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I will say
More so Aaron and Quentin. No, I'm kidding.
For those of you who weren't there, you did miss me starting my talk by telling the whole room they were wrong. So next time you get a chance to come see the Prophet in person, I'm biased, but I highly recommend it. I do, Jimmy, want to get to our guest today, though, because we do have an amazing, incredible guest, maybe one of the best ever on this podcast. And who's just been in the news very, very recently. So it's just so timely and relevant to have him on. We have none other than Steven Sauls. Steven is the CEO of Rivalry, one of the preeminent esports betting companies, and now public esports betting company. Steven, welcome to the Business of Esports Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love the nickname, so it's great. Yeah, happy to be here.
Steven, like for our listeners who haven't maybe heard about you or haven't heard about Rivalry, or maybe have and want a bit more of the background, would love for you to tell them your story, how you got into gaming, how you ended up at Rivalry, what you're focused on there. Just some of the Steven and Rivalry story would be great.
Yeah, I think it's similar to a lot of people. Sorry, there's some dogs in the background. I think there's a lot of people that have a similar story, which is just playing a ton of games when I was younger. I have an identical twin, which we were just talking about off camera. So we were very addicted to World of Warcraft, like a lot of people. So played that for 4 or 5 years, and then we were nice. Yeah, I guess it depends, like Horde or Alliance.
Horde or Alliance, Steven.
Yeah,
that's
Alliance,
the important question.
Alliance,
oh, thank God, yes, yes.
Yeah. So
Mokhtar.
Yeah, I was a human priest. My brother was a gnome mage. So yeah,
I was a human mage, only because I don't like how the gear looks like on a gnome. Even though gnome is the better choice.
Yeah, he definitely learned that the hard way. But we played that a lot. We were really addicted to the first iteration of Rainbow Six on Xbox and like Xbox Live early 2000s, like when it just came out. And there was some competitive action happening in Canada. And yes, I'm based in Toronto. I'm from Toronto. And I think people from here know the Fan Expo. It's like the Canadian version of Comic-Con. It's like a Canadian smaller version of it. And MLG, so this is like big time throwback, like early MLG would show up there. And because that was the only place where there was it wasn't called esports, obviously, just like competitive gaming. As MLG would show up, there'd be like Halo pros, because it was really just Halo at the time. And then they would also host some kind of pickup tournaments around like Rainbow Six and StarCraft and random games like this. And it was literally like folding chairs and like 2 people. Like it was just the people waiting to play, watching the other people playing. So we did stuff like that. It was fun. And there was all this stuff around Quake, and we did a little bit of that. And then professionally went into capital markets. So I worked in finance and different kind of research role in an investment bank. And then from there was looking at different opportunities in like the gaming and esports space back in like 2013, I'd say 2014, was buying and selling and trading a lot of skins. So like CSGO and Dota 2 skins, and got familiar with the guys running one called Loot Market, which anyone here who was a Dota player might remember. It was the largest, at least by transaction volume, it was the largest Dota 2 skins marketplace in like 2015 and 16 and into 17. And they happened to be in Toronto. I was looking at getting more involved from, call it like an investment entrepreneurial perspective in late 2015, and was getting a little tired of the finance kind of investment banking job, and was talking to them. We were just really becoming friends. Their names are Ryan White and Kevin Wimmer. They were serial entrepreneurs, kind of early tech internet guys, not just necessarily gaming guys, but Kevin actually was a pro in Korea and StarCraft for a little bit, and then was a top 10 guy in Unreal Tournament in North America for a while. And we were just looking at like different opportunities together. So I was like the finance guy, getting excited by the space, ended up forming a bit of a partnership with them and co-founding the company that would become Rivalry at the end of 2016. And our view was originally just to be almost like a holding company that would invest in other people doing things in gaming and esports, because we thought, hey, this skins marketplace is great and it was a good business, but extremely high risk because Valve could just shut us off at will, which was exactly what happened. Which is exactly what happened about 12 months later. Yeah. And I learned a lot from that. And then in late 2016, our investment thesis, which honestly I'd say is like the same as our investment thesis today, we would look at different things to get more involved in gaming, is we feel that assets that would be most successful in gaming and esports are ones that are agnostic of game publisher IP. So don't touch it, don't get involved at all. Agnostic of game cyclicality, because it's impossible to predict the longevity of new IP. I mean, there is some historical IP like Counter-Strike, et cetera, but new IP, very difficult to know for how long it will be successful. And obviously the publisher themselves don't know. And also be API agnostic, because we were so exposed to the Valve risk with loot markets. We thought, hey, if you can tick all those boxes, you've got something that has kind of uncapped upside and can be not beholden to the publisher. We don't have to deal with franchise fees, licensing. We don't have to worry about game cyclicality if this is popular for however long, nowhere near APIs. And the biggest opportunity we felt at the time, and obviously with bias, still think today, would be sports betting on esports. So building a product that would ride the wave of what we knew would be continuous growth in esports. We don't care what's popular and for how long. We'll offer betting on it. We don't touch the publisher's IP in a way we have to license or franchise anything. And we obviously rely on no APIs. So that's turned actually esports betting as a revenue category. It's almost bigger than the aggregate of all other esports revenue categories combined. So that was an investment thesis. We were looking at people doing that at the time. There was only Unicorn, which just got bought. So Rapul Suit and those guys. We just thought, honestly, it's early enough and a big enough thesis. We've got a development team. We've built a product successfully already for the space, and we'll just do it ourselves. It was somewhat like innocuous. We didn't realize how difficult it would be to build a regulated global sports betting business, but we went down that path, raised some money, and then just decided to do it. And then in early 2017 into early 2018, getting our license, building the product from scratch. So we built everything ourselves in-house, and then launched it in kind of like summer 2018 on the back of the International that year, and like sponsored Fnatic and Richard Lewis. And that was kind of like, you know, our coming out party to the world is Rivalry about 3.5 years ago. Yeah.
And Stephen, just out of curiosity, like, it's an amazing story. First of all, congratulations. You left out that you guys are now public, right?
Yeah. So we had a direct listing. I think the fully diluted market cap was a 200 or 220 million Canadian. So about, I don't know, 180 to 200 million US or something. Yeah.
But massive success story given the time frame, right? Like, this is only a 4-year-old company essentially, or?
Yeah, I'd say like going public as a sports book, though, you will go public earlier than a typical business, purely because there's a speed unlock that happens when you go public. So because it's so regulated, and we are in like the most regulated jurisdiction, and we're getting more country licenses, and we're just getting regulation on regulation, a significant part of the licensing process is due diligence into like the company, the founders, shareholders, et cetera. And the same thing for getting new payment providers, and lots of like critical operational bits where sometimes onboarding a new payment provider, so for customers to deposit and withdraw, can take something 6 months just to complete the due diligence. It's completely insane. So you can actually skip almost all of that when you're public, assuming you're public with a legitimate jurisdiction and real regulator, and Canada is obviously respected in that way. So it gave us huge speed there. And then the other one is access to capital. So raising money as a private sports betting business is just not easy. Anyone that owns more than 5% of the company has to go on all of your individual gambling licenses. This is like so onerous. I just can't even get into it. So it pushes people away. So we went public earlier. If this was like a SaaS company, we would be public, 4 or 5 years from now. But there's a speed advantage we get with being a public company. So we went a little earlier for sure.
And Stephen, where do you position yourselves like within the ecosystem of other, call it just betting companies in general, not specifically esports betting? Because, you've got the DraftKings and the Pens, like the online only sports books. You've got, all the Las Vegas casinos doing their own sports books and dabbling with some esports stuff. Where do you guys fit in that ecosystem? How do you what quadrant do you put Rivalry in? How does it different from everything else that's out there?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're like most companies where when we show a competitive quadrant, we have everybody clustered in one spot, and then we're off the top right. Yeah,
if that's not how the chart looks, you're doing it wrong.
We fucked it up. No, so we're very realistic. So I'd say the thing that makes us different is, one, we are like tech guys and gamers that went into sports betting, not sports betting guys that saw an opportunity in esports and are making like esports brands. We see that a lot. Those businesses seem to not be as successful. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. So that's one, just like the DNA of the company. And then the other would be an analogy we've used for a while is, let's say Robinhood versus like Charles Schwab. it's kind of what Rivalry is to Bet365 or DraftKings. We did not reinvent the wheel. We did not reinvent the wheel making money on sports betting. We make money the same way bookies make money for pre-internet. So the business model is the same and it works. What we did, similar to what like a Robinhood did, or in Canada, Wealthsimple is kind of our Robinhood, is we built a great brand user experience, onboarding, customer support, everything top to bottom that was designed in such a way to more successfully onboard, retain, and monetize a really under 25 user that is more consistent with the demographic that we serve. So Robinhood's average user is under 25. They deposit like $1,000 to $2,000. A Charles Schwab customer is very different than that. Same thing with Bet365. An average Bet365 customer sports betting is early to mid 30s and up. Our guy is 18 to 25 on average. So all of our customers are under the age of 30. They're coming in through esports, not traditional sports. Also, in many cases, they're not just a first-time user of our site; they are a first-time bettor, period, in their life. So it is like an extremely different onboarding experience. The same as many for Robinhood users, they are first-time investors in their life. So like everything is just designed in such a way to make that experience, I guess, more comfortable, and also for the brand to be more consistent and aligned with what they're expecting. It's very hard for like the sportsbook your dad uses or the place your dad invests to become cool to the kids, and this has like been the case through history with like multiple cycles of consumer products. So that's really what we did, and then we just think we've executed on that very well relative to our competitors.
So two things I wanted to unpack from that, actually, Paul, to build on that. One, you had mentioned, non-endemics that are coming into this space as opposed to ones that are gaming or inherent gaming companies. Why do you think those non-endemics are failing? What are some of the reasons that you can point to, or not necessarily failing, but maybe some struggles or things that you guys or others in your shoes are doing better?
So you definitely have some like Pinnacle and Betway esports that have been there for a long time, and like they are successful. I mean, esports is a growing and important part of their business. I think we know that the complexion of their customer is quite different than ours, definitely older, definitely more experienced, a little sharper. In some cases, it's someone that has converted from traditional sports betting to esports. So I think those two in particular from the non-endemic side have had the most success, and they've done a good job, and I don't really have much to say bad about them. From the esports specific side, we do have a lot of competitors, whether it's Unicorn or LoopBet, Luckbox, Vi.gg, Picklebet. I don't know. There's a ton of them. I think the way that we philosophically look at this is esports is kind of a brand positioning and an angle and a community in a market we know very well, and we know how to build brand and build consumer awareness in that market. But ultimately, esports betting alone as an opportunity is not as significant as just using esports as an entry point for a different generation of sports bettors. So many people for Rivalry, they come in to bet on esports. They're 24 years old, they're League of Legends fans, but they're also in South America and they love soccer. So it is highly likely they will also bet on soccer on our site. And then we can convert them to other products. So I think, there's just lots of different nuances. I think that non-endemics that are doing it well understand how to take a mature, sharper, traditional sports bettor and make them an esports bettor. And Betway Esports and Pinnacle have done a really good job of that. And then in our, let's say, endemic space, it's understanding how to build brand to acquire a younger customer, which is just super hard for any consumer brand targeting under 25s in any industry. Everyone struggles. It's really hard. And then also understanding the opportunity is not just esports betting. You have to provide like a super cohesive, like just online sports betting experience, period. They want to have a great soccer product and cricket and everything else. So it's just, it's a bit of everything.
So to that same, or I guess in that same line of thinking, to the extent you're able, I'm also curious, what you're looking at in terms of the cost to acquire these new users, and some of the things that you're doing to, I suppose, lower that cost or optimize these funnels, like you said, and filtering them to more products once they're in your doors.
Yeah, so we've publicly disclosed our cost of customer acquisition. We are public now, so I have to be careful. I'm not sure if we'll do it forever in the future because, to our knowledge, we're the only public sports betting company in the world that discloses cost of customer acquisition. So I'm not sure if we're going to continue doing it. But what we've shown historically, going back to the inception of the company, is for almost a year and a half, 2 years now, our average cost of customer acquisition globally for a first-time depositor, which is like a new customer for a sports book, is under $50 US, like 50 US. The average for a mature, like EU-based sportsbook generally, just for a sports bettor, is like $350 to $500. And we know guys in the US right now for US sports bettors are spending over $1,000.
Yep.
So we know we acquire like very cheap, and we've gone that down consistently over time. There's a inverse relationship, or I guess I would say, it is correlated, but we found that as the success of the brand has grown, just because the success of our own social media properties, media content, everything we do to increase brand resonance globally, our cost of customer acquisition has declined as well. And it's like having any great consumer product. The more brand awareness you have, the more likely you are to acquire users organically, the more likely they are to retain and spend money and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, our cost of customer acquisition is extremely low, which means that on a ARPU or like a monthly profitability or annual profitability basis to cost of customer acquisition, we're at about 2.5 times, gearing to about 3 times right now. So we make money on all of our customers for almost 2 years now. And again, if you were to compare to the US, we know that the US sportsbooks are yet to even break even in most cases on their customers still.
Why do you think yours is so much lower, Steven? Because I've seen some of these numbers from some of the other companies. I hadn't heard thousands, but I've heard some of these costs go up to like $800, $900. Why are you guys like literally an order of magnitude, smaller in terms of like what is the secret sauce there? If you can talk to it at all, or
Yeah, to be fair, like our LTV or our ARPU is correspondingly lower to an extent, right? So a mature sports bettor will do apparently like an $800 to $1,000 ARPU, basically, right? Ours is not that. It's like $150 to $200 just because they're younger. So our user is about, on average, more than a decade younger than the average sports bettor on most sports books. So it is lower, but I mean, even if you take it on a relative basis, it is still much lower than most sports books. I think, again, what we found is it was a great kind of tweet from a VC. It was really simple, but it just stuck with me for like 2-3 years now, which is that any consumer company targeting Gen Z and young millennials, so people under the age of 30, also has to be a media company. And I thought it was a good way of putting it because the great consumer products, including everything Barstool basically has done, Robinhood, I think Coinbase has done a really good job of this. And we saw Coinbase is hiring to build a whole production studio in Phoenix now, so they're getting deeper into content. I think we've always said that as part of like our ethos, and we've got 25 plus social media properties, around 700,000 followers. In most of our markets, we have the largest social property for sports betting, not just esports betting, and the most followed. And our global engagement on our properties is almost like 2x the aggregate of all of our competitors in esports betting, like all of them combined and all of their pages. So we found like the success of the brand in our markets and like the equity we have in our markets we have about 30 to 35 people just focused on like creative and content and marketing on that, has correspondingly created a continuous reduction in cost of customer acquisition. It's really like, I'd say that's the only real relationship.
So content leading the way. I mean, it's not the first time I've heard that, but I think you guys have done it better than just about anyone else.
I think the most important thing is like own content. So like there's a difference between like renting your customer, which I think a lot of people do, where you're renting buys and renting viewership and you can pay for that, and having like organically originally developed content and social properties that have fandom attached to your brand equity rather than something transient, like some influencer or something that you've brought in for a like brief moment in time. And even our partners, I mean, we do have a lot of partners. We have 120 plus brand partners that we work with across all of our markets. We run it a little different. It's not just, here's our logo for your stream for the next couple of months and it rotates with your other sponsors. It's almost more like a Red Bull, like where you become part of the family. We have all them cross collaborate. We invest in them and their community. We'll, invest in production and studio time for them to build out like their own content and their own brand. Like we do like really, really deep integrations and make them feel like much more like brand partners than just, rented,
cool.
mouthpieces, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you at all have influence or say in terms of, your own priorities on what social outlets that your brand partners choose to distribute through, or do you more so look at them as, I like their brand and however they interact with their community is up to them, and we're going to trust them in that regard?
The latter, like what you just said, for sure. Yeah. So we rely, we know we're quite good now at spotting influencers in markets that have communities following specific titles that will be good for our business. But I'd say the way that we approach it is we always go in with, we're here to enhance the success of you and your community. So like our goal is like, we want someone by the time they're done a partnership, and we always try to renew, but to the extent that they're done a partnership with us, their concurrent views on their stream should be up. They should have more subscribers. Like we're trying to create like success for their business. And then by default, it will pass back value to Rivalry over time.
Steven, I just wanted to go back to a point you made earlier about how you guys can take an esports bettor, right? Someone who's come in to bet on Dota and get them to put money on a soccer match also. I usually, obviously, and you alluded to this, I usually hear the opposite story, right? Which is all the traditional sports books want, esports betting as sort of a way to increase the total ARPU, and as a way to move good sports bettors into something new that they can spend money on. I'm interested, is the logical conclusion of what you're saying that pure play esports betting companies in the long run will not survive? Is that a fair conclusion to make from what you said?
Yeah, I don't know how many are just pure play esports anymore. I mean, maybe there are some. I gotta imagine that they're all trying to introduce sports. Like, what you realize really quickly when you get into this industry, even with this demographic, is sports betting is less like a chef's tasting menu and more like a buffet. Like, you need to offer everything, and the customer will kind of pick and choose and determine what they want. And I'd say that was our first misconception when we went into this, is we did think it was more, we could create almost the content for the user, and we learned very quickly that that was totally incorrect. So yeah, the other thing is like, most people that are esports fans in most markets are, in many cases, we find at least, also sports fans. Like, South America is a big region for us. I mean, they all watch soccer and they want to bet on soccer, and same thing in even Southeast Asia. Like, there's a huge NBA fan base there, which I didn't fully appreciate. And when the NBA is on, I mean, they want to bet on the NBA. Yeah.
How long does that hold true, Stephen? Do you think this holds true forever, or 10 years from now, esports is so big that a pure play might work? Like, is there some timeline where you think maybe this doesn't hold true anymore?
I think esports as a percentage of the total global wagers will continue to increase, and I expect that if you're going to look 10 years out, it could be one of the most dominant categories. But I think there's going to be continuous success for, call it like, we call it like the meat sports. I think those will continue to have audience and fandom. And you are seeing a lot of, I mean, in most places, there's such a steeped culture where the grandfather was a fan, and then the dad was a fan, and the son is a fan, and same thing, and it goes on and on. So I think there will always be that kind of continuity. And even really modern brands, like I think Formula One, I mean, everyone has seen Drive to Survive and how successful it's been in increasing audience and viewership. And there are tons of people even at the company that all of a sudden are like F1 fans, which is great. But again, there's ways of introducing sports like that to like a modern and younger audience that I think the right leagues and operators are becoming really accustomed to and getting really strong at. And also in the drivers are young. I mean, like those drivers, Lando Norris, like they're in their early 20s, and when it was COVID, they were streaming on Twitch. So even like, I think the athlete understands so well now how to like interface with the kind of gaming creator space. Because something we've talked about in a piece with like a esports insider thing is, we've always looked at gamers, and the way we think about our partners, which are often always gaming creators, is gamers are now like the tastemakers of culture globally. So we always think about it that way. And that's why like the Formula One guys have been pulled into being Twitch streamers, and they want to mess with the guys on Twitch and same with like NBA players and rappers, etc. Like what rap did to the NBA and how those came together in like the late 80s, early 90s is kind of what gaming is doing now for culture, I think. So, so like I think there's just gonna be value that's gonna be passed back and forth. I think sports will continue to be a piece of the pie and important.
Funny you mentioned that. Business of Esports, always ahead of the curve. Jimmy and I are going to be in Austin this week for Formula One. So,
nice.
Do you have a favorite, real quick, Steven? Do you have a favorite on that Drive to Survive, or if you're an F1 fan?
I mean, like I want to see Verstappen win the
there you go.
It would be nice because I think if Lewis wins this year, then it's an all time, because right now he's tied with Schumacher, right? So I think if he wins this year, then he's just like number one for everything, which is also kind of cool to see, I guess. So yeah, I'm just a fan of the drama. Like I think somebody, it's like a bunch of physics and math nerds combined with a bunch of politics and money, and that's what Formula One is, right? So it's great.
But in some ways, esports has to capture that magic. That's a bit of a rabbit hole, but there's we're not there yet. Like there's a bit of magic there that I think we could get to.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think I talked about this with some of the guys we do a lot of production work with. So there's a company, Do Not Peak, in Phoenix. Jason Baker and Scott Smith are Scoots, and we very close with them. And we talk about that a lot. Is like, how do you kind of create more B-roll for gaming to create more backstory and drama, and people, I mean, like those guys have been at it for 20 years, right? So I mean, it's hard, and it's going to get there, though, I think, for sure. I think there's becoming more contextual awareness from the pros and the streamers on how important that element is and how to kind of cultivate it.
So Stephen, what are some of the things like then you are focused on going forward? Like, what are the key priorities for Rivalry going forward? How do you guys, how do you grow 10x? Like, where does all that growth come from for you guys?
And specifically, if there's a mobile element, want to dive into that as well. But yeah, great.
Yeah, so I guess it's 3 pillars. One is like always adding more product, so which is not just like more sports titles, esports titles, but our original casino game Rush Lane and this universe we're building, adding more depth to that, adding more of like that style of, call it game of chance. But mobile esports, definitely, we think that within the next 2 to 3 years, even, that the most wagered esports in the top 5 will include at least 2 mobile titles. So, so right now it's 0, and it's because there's no great odds provision or product that is provided by any of the major providers on mobile esports betting. My expectation is this time next year that will be very, very different than where it is today. And I think it's going to completely like open up a lot of those regions and a lot of those titles in a super meaningful way. And I expect that from a total wagers basis, you're going to see like absolutely insane growth in mobile esports is our expectation for sure. And we're seeing like the inklings of it in lots of different places. Yeah, very extremely bullish on that for sure. And then beyond product, it would be licenses in new markets. So we're in a regulated business. We chose to be a very clean, regulated, top jurisdictions, public company in Canada, accredited investors, et cetera, rather than pulling like a roulette and playing one of those games. It's not really who we are. So there's a lot of like ethical components of that, and also because like the consumer is not as sophisticated. Like I think we have to do them a favor and make sure they're doing the right thing, because the customer is on a place like roulette, which in many cases can be underage. They just don't know better, and I think it's like the responsibility of the operators to choose to do it right rather than do it wrong. So we always are going for more licenses and more jurisdictions. We've got a Isle of Man license, which is a global gray market, kind of blue chip beachhead license. We recently earned a license in Australia, so that'll be our first country license. We'll be there very soon. Ontario in Canada, largest province, and it would be the 5th largest state if it were in the US in terms of betting. They just legalized sports betting. Being from here, you can imagine that's something we're in the process of doing. And then we are looking for a lot of other opportunities in Europe and elsewhere for new licenses. So just continuing to add to kind of our geographic surface area, I would say. And then the last piece is media. So we're like massively investing behind more media content, production capability, all that kind of stuff, just to continue to like enhance our voice and enhance like the IP portfolio of Rivalry. So it doesn't always have to be like Rivalry branded social or content. We do run social properties that are not exactly Rivalry branded. We are producing shows that are not always Rivalry branded shows, or IP like Rush Lane, and building up more content around that. So yeah, to the extent that we can continue to increase our reach from a media perspective, both for directly Rivalry branded IP and stuff that is clearly affiliated and associated with us, is good. And that's just, that increases what we call like wallet surface area. So licenses is geographic, and media and brand equity is wallet, and the two combined is really the focus.
And Stephen, now that you're public, I guess I can ask this question, like how much of this growth is going to come organically in your mind versus, are you going to start, tapping capital markets to raise more money to go and acquire other businesses? Are you going to go acquire content companies? Are you going to go acquire companies that may have licenses in jurisdictions where you guys want to be? Is that part of the strategy, or is this all organic growth in your mind?
Both of those things for sure. So yeah, we've never bought anything historically. We've been really focused on our core business and making sure we can make that as successful as possible. But now I'd say we have a playbook that works really well there. So we have like consistency. We know how long in a market it takes for us to become profitable in unit economics. We know how to launch the brand in the market, and it's kind of just rinse and repeat. And now it's just creating operational scale to do that quicker and faster. So that the majority will still come from, I'd say, organic. But yeah, for sure, there are some jurisdictions where you can't just walk in the front door and apply for a sports betting license like you can in the UK, Australia, Ontario, and a lot of other places. You do have to go in through, by way of M&A. A lot of the core of EU is like that, Italy, Portugal, Poland, places like that. So yeah, so we are definitely spending time looking at those opportunities. And then on the media side as well, yeah, we're very actively looking at, increased studio capability, like production capability, apps or brands that are consistent with our brand that have reach in relevant geographies. So we will do that, but we're not culture is really important to us. So I'd say culture, impact of mixing teams is probably our biggest consideration, almost more than price. And that's why we've been really cautious and never really done this historically. Yeah.
Interesting. I just want to drill back down on the sort of the customer experience, because that's a big part of, the value proposition for you guys. How much education do you find you have to do to get a new esports bettor in the door and actually spending money? Like, is there a big hurdle still from the esports side?
Yeah. So also because like their behavior is not at all like a traditional sports bettor. So they do not bet like their parent did, and we don't expect they ever will. It's kind of like the guys buying GameStop on Robinhood are, the way they spread their money around is a little different than the way their dad invests. We heard a stat yesterday because we just got a listing in Frankfurt, which is just kind of like a sister listing to our primary listing and just opens up to EU a bit. In Germany, apparently there are more people under the age of 30 with crypto wallets than brokerage accounts for investing in stocks, which is really not surprising to me. And that's kind of directionally where everything is going. So the reason why I bring that whole thing up is our user and customer is the same person that is more likely to have the crypto wallet than the broker wallet, more likely to invest in GameStop than they are in Apple and things like this. Because I'd say that what we've noticed with consumer experiences is it's less transactional and conservative and more about creating like entertainment and clout in addition to the potential upside. So like people bought GameStop on Robinhood, not just because they wanted to they obviously wanted to make money on it and hoped it would go up, but also it was like a ticket into the meme, and it was like a ticket into like the cloud of the whole experience, and going on TikTok and showing it in your Robinhood portfolio. And it was like you were buying into like the whole energy of it, right? And we find that the way people are betting is similar. Like they enter Rivalry not with like, I want to be a sharp and screw these guys on a handicap or some like obscure market. It's like, no, I'm from this country. My hometown team is playing. I've seen this guy play in person or went to the same, high school as me or whatever it may be. And like, they want to be part of like supporting the team, supporting the community. There's a lot of, pride in some of these regions for sure. And there is a lot of like entertainment-based betting we find where they're betting on what is statistically like a huge underdog, very, very unlikely to win. They're almost guaranteed to lose their money, but they like take their Rivalry bet slip and tweet about it and create a conversation with their favorite influencer. There's a lot of like that interplay in the experience. So I'd say we inject more of that to create that kind of sense of entertainment in addition to like the potential upside of winning the bet. And then we do mix in some education for sure. So we've got this thing called like Rivalry Academy, which does educate them on like literal things like, managing your wallet and what are handicaps and how does this kind of betting work. And then we have the influencers we work with that have more betting focused audiences do the same. They will do some educational content and things like this.
And then one last question on sort of the differentiators you had mentioned earlier. One was like, hey, we're tech focused first and foremost, right?
Yep.
How important is it for you to be vertically integrated in your mind? So like the people doing all the odds now, like is that functionality? Is that, something you want to have in-house at some point? Is this, considering you want to have the content in-house, you want to have the platform in-house, like how vertically integrated do you want Rivalry to be? And do you think that's important to its long-term success?
Odds is the only thing I'm not sure on near term. I think because most sportsbooks don't produce their own odds, or they take a ton of feeds and they're relying on those feeds, and they have a few traders in house that kind of massage it a little bit. But to do like full odds making in house, I could be wrong on this, but I'm assuming only the top 15 to 20 sportsbooks globally have the resources to do this. Like if you want to fully trade and produce 100% of the odds on all the major esports and sports, you need a couple hundred people just to do that, like minimum. So it's also kind of, this is maybe somewhat unfair to say, but like it is a bit of a commoditized part of the industry. Like for example, like people are not coming in for your odds. It's kind of like any consumer product. Like anyone, like you don't go to Robinhood because you can buy different stocks than you can on Charles Schwab. Like they have all the same stocks. It's the same as us. Like we have all the same odds and lines as Bet365. So we don't really see that as like a huge point of differentiation. I'd say the biggest point of differentiation is more like the front end, complete user experience, user flow, everything from like filling in your information, KYC, because what's tough actually, back to the prior question about onboarding this user, as I say, is less the education about betting, but more like the friction of onboarding into like a regulated experience. And that is again how like we focus so much on this and work with regulators on it a lot as well, because we want to be the good guys and win against the Rubets of the world, where you just QR code and VPN and put whatever information you want and you're in. Whereas with Rivalry, because we're so regulated, you're filling out, a full KYC form. We're connected to third-party approved registered databases within that country to match the information you're giving us to make sure you're an actual human being that lives there. We're checking your IP. Like, there's so much that goes into it. And if you're under 25, it's your first time betting, you live online with a gamer tag or a pseudonym, and we're asking you before you can do anything on the site to give us your full name and a picture of yourself with your passport. It's a lot. So yeah, so we use a lot of different steps in the onboarding flow to make that as low friction as possible, so it doesn't like push people away from the experience, and to kind of educate them on why we're doing it. So like that is actually probably the hardest part of bringing this user on, I'd say, is that. Yeah.
Steven, I just have one last question, which is related to just the space in general. It's been red hot from an M&A perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've seen DraftKings buying content, Penn buying content, Entain bought Unicorn, like what you mentioned. There's a ton of M&A consolidation all happening in the space right now. Is, in your mind, the future of Rivalry, like when one of the huge sports books wants to get into esports, that you're the one they go and buy? Or like how do you think about what's happening from an M&A perspective, being a finance guy previously? Or are you not even thinking about that at all?
We've had our fair share of people reach out to us. I'd say that we always tell them the same thing, which is kind of give us 2 years from now, just because our roadmap of new licenses, new markets, and product goes out about 24 months. I mean, at that point, it'll probably go out another 2 years, but at least we know that the next 2 years we think takes us to a point where it's at a really good state that we think will be, in orders of magnitude above where we are today in value. And that is our expectation based on how we're pacing. So we want to continue to deliver and do what we started this business to do. And I don't want to, we've resisted a lot of offers to take it out the stage, and we'll probably continue to do so. I mean, unless it's something ridiculous. I mean, but I don't think it'll come around. So yeah, so that's kind of where we're at on that side. Yeah.
Okay. Jimmy, I don't know if you had anything else.
Got one last question, probably the most important one of the podcast. As someone that played World of Warcraft for 4 years, have you played any New Worlds? Any thoughts on New Worlds?
No. It's like I've seen a bunch of the streamers play it, and I don't know. I played Classic for like a second, and I was like, just it's like listening to like an album like that was really important to you and was super nostalgic, and like in a moment in time in like your teenage years, it like really meant something. Like for me, it was like a bunch of different Red Hot Chili Pepper albums, and I listen when I'm older, and it just doesn't feel the same. And I think like I played Classic, and it just like I felt like I was ruining like my previous memories of it, and I just like didn't want to go back, and I stopped, to be honest. And in New World, I look at it, and it just like I don't feel anything when I look at it. I'm just not for me. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say you realized you didn't have 10 hours a day to sink into
an
MMO anymore.
Not also. Yeah. That for sure is true. Yeah.
Steven, you're amazing. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. If people want to follow you, follow Rivalry, where can they find you? Where can they find Rivalry? Like what is the best place to go get information or to connect?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely always tweeting and keeping people up to date on what we're up to. So my Twitter is just my full name. So it's just Steven Sauls. And then Rivalry is just rivalry.com is our consumer site. And then rivalrycorp.com is like our IR site, which has more kind of corporate information, presentation, et cetera. Yeah.
Very cool. Super excited that you guys are public now. Congratulations again. And, curious to see where this goes, but I'm so bullish on the space. Everyone knows who watches the podcast or listens to the podcast regularly. This is something I think is going to be much bigger than most people realize. So definitely one to watch, guys. If you're listening and you're a regular, just a couple of notes. One, make sure to follow Business of Esports everywhere: YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you get your content from us, LinkedIn. Make sure to follow us in all those places. And we do a live stream Wednesday night. If you love all the news that we used to do on the podcast, we do it now mostly on the live stream. The live stream has become mostly a news show, weekly news show. It's a bigger cast. And the best part is we get to do it live with you guys. You get to ask us questions, get in our faces, challenge us. So that's Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, every single Wednesday. So make sure to show up for that. Thank you guys, Jimmy, Steven, both of you. And thank you for everyone for listening. And we will see you all next week.
Thanks, guys.